Well, welcome to you all to this fantastic event, the event of the century. I think you'll probably not agree, actually. But I'm Mark. If you don't know me, I'm Mark. I'm the curate here. And welcome to Take a Pew Podcast Live. It is great to have you here joining us in the audience and on the podcast for what will be a really special show. What I hope will be a really special show. Some of you may know I was a guest on Take a Pew. I was the first to be interviewed by Ian and Simon. And rather wonderfully, it reminded me of a scene from Return of the Jedi where Luke is incessantly asking Yoda questions, and Yoda's response is basically to curl up and die. So my thoughts are definitely with Nick, who is about to enter the interviewee's lion's den. So let's crack on with the show. It's time for the Take a Pew Podcast Live. So please welcome your hosts, Ian Wishart and Simon Clark.
Hello everyone, I'm Ian Wishart and I'm here of course with the frankly astonishing Simon Clark.
Hello everyone.
Now don't start that again, mate.
Sorry mate.
Look, we're here together to bring you a very special episode of the Take a Pew podcast in our home church in the village of Purford with an amazing live audience! Oh, fantastic. Well done.
And if that were not enough, we have a very special guest indeed. We have our own rector, who this very weekend is celebrating 40 years of ordination. Woo!
Yes, the Reverend Canon Nick Aiken, BA, MA, cycling proficiency.
Wow.
25-yard breaststroke. And a scout badge for sewing on a button.
Well, he certainly sounds well qualified for the job, but the real question is he well qualified to be a guest on Take a Pew?
Well, with 40 years of priesthood under his belt, he must have a few tales to tell. But we can find out right now, because this is the Take a Pew podcast with Canon Nick Aiken.
Nick Aiken!
Take a pew.
Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And please, take a pew.
Thank you.
So, hi Nick, it's great to have you here, and of course most people in the audience actually know you, but perhaps you could just introduce yourself for the benefit of our wonderful internet listeners.
Well, I've been given a script and Ian's told me to say, hello, I am Nicholas Aiken, I am 64, I'm married to Hilary, and we have 2 grown-up boys. I was ordained in 1982, and I'm currently rector of the parish of Wisley-with-Purford, a position I've held for 29 years. That's what he told me to say.
I thought it was magnificent. Well, I look forward to you maintaining that level of panache, Nick, in the rest of the show. But thanks. Now, as usual on Take a Pew, we're looking forward to getting to know the human being behind the job title. And we'll do that by boarding the train that will take us from Childhood Junction to Future Parkway, calling at Favourite Things Halt and Perfect Picnic Post.
Yes, indeed, as well as picking up some coal and water from North, Is It True? Then passing through Simon's Random Questions South, and of course then finishing off at Spiritual Pearl of Wisdom Central.
Yes, it's going to be quite a ride. But Nick, this is an express service, so let's build up a head of steam and start at the very beginning. Where did life start for you? I heard it was somewhere north of the Falkland Islands.
Well, my parents were living in Norwich at the time. My father was in the RAF, and I was born in Norwich. I don't know whether you know Norwich. It's a lovely, beautiful city. And my grandmother lived there. She was born there as well. And my mum was born there, and my dad was stationed nearby at the time.
What was your family unit in those very early years? You obviously had your mum and dad.
Yeah, I've got a sister who's 2.5 years younger than me, and I've got another sister who's 14.5 years younger than me.
So you started in Norwich. What happened next?
Then we were posted to Yorkshire, that's right.
Okay.
I don't remember it very well.
Big impression on you, Nick. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And then my sister was born in Yorkshire, in fact, in Beverley, if I remember correctly. So we were there for a short time. And then from there, in fact, Dad was posted to Singapore.
Wow, okay.
And that's when one's memories really begin to chime, because it was just such a fantastic experience. Although I do remember just before we flew out to Singapore, watching on television the funeral for John F. Kennedy on the television, black and white, with my grandmother, and obviously not quite understanding what was going on. But that was one of my memories before we flew out to Singapore. And I remember particularly the journey there, because we flew on a Britannia aircraft, Bristol Britannia. It was a turboprop, 4-engined, and I think it took 24 hours to get there. And I remember one of the airports we stopped off in, I think it was India. There was a runway and a shack and a fridge in the shack. And as you got off the aircraft, there was a chap opened the fridge, you helped yourself to drinks, they refueled the aircraft, and off we flew again. I mean, it was pretty basic in those days. None of your gleaming international airports, wherever you go, you know, plate glass everywhere.
Yeah, so
it was pretty basic.
Quite an adventure, quite a voyage, obviously then.
It
So
was.
what was life like out there?
It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. The social life was fantastic, and the lifestyle that you lived was just remarkable. Singapore was a great place, and eventually one went to school there, and you'd start school, I think it was at 8 in the morning, and it finished at 1 o'clock. So the rest of the day you spent at the country club or the beach or whatever.
Super.
It was fantastic.
Were you up to any mischief then, Nick, in that time?
Oh, I was always incredibly well behaved. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. I remember my first day at school feeling rather anxious, but the assembly hall was in the centre of the school, and there was actually classrooms around the quad. And I still remember to this day singing lovely hymns at the beginning of school assemblies, which have always stayed with me, really.
Right. So how long did you had a few years there, was it?
We were there almost 3 years.
Okay, and then back to Blighty?
Yeah. Well, we were heartbroken to have to come home because, as I said, we lived the life of Riley. And I remember on one occasion, my parents went out to parties either at the officers' mess or the country club 11 nights in a row. And the armour used to get us up for breakfast in the morning, and I'd see my parents roll in before we went off to school.
So back home with a bump by the sound.
Back home, we came home in the August, and we flew back via Bombay and Kuwait. And I remember getting off the aircraft in Kuwait, and this was after living in the tropics for almost 3 years. The heat was absolutely unbearable. And then we came back to the UK in August, and it was freezing, absolutely freezing. And I remember feeling cold for a year after living in Singapore.
So that was, and you ended up in Northern Ireland at some point, did you?
Yeah, we came back from Singapore, and then Dad was stationed at RAF Little Risington, which is a training airfield, and then was posted to Northern Ireland, to Queen's University Air Squadron. As you know, all of the major universities in these countries have air squadrons for the cadets, where they train university students to fly in the hope of getting them into the RAF. And that was a lovely time. In the late 60s, it was a great place to be. Things were going so well in Northern Ireland. There was no troubles. There was a lot of inward investment. There was a lot of confidence. And then, of course, it all went pear-shaped. But I had been to 6 different primary schools up until the age of 11. So I was seriously sort of a year behind in terms of education. So parents decided to send me to boarding school. And Dad had been to this particular school in Northern Ireland, Coleraine Inst, which was formed in, I think, 1860. It was a brilliant school. And I was sent there in 1969. But at the end of the first year, Dad was posted to RAF Bryce Norton on Transport Command. And he said, well, right, come back to England and go to another school here. And I said, I am sick to death of changing schools. I'm staying put.
So you obviously spent your formative years there in many ways at that boarding school.
Yeah.
And which I think gives us a perfect opportunity to ask you a question. And our question is...
What were you like at school? Were you a little bit geeky? Or were you a little bit freaky? Or were you a little bit cheeky? What were you like at school?
Yes, Nick, what were you like at that school?
Boarding school at first, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. It was very much like Tom Brown's school days. It was pretty brutal, actually. But as time went by, I actually grew to really quite love the place. It had great staff. The environment changed to be something far more humane. And actually, in the end, they wanted me to go back as head boy. But in fact, I went off to university instead. But at school, I wasn't particularly academically gifted. My excuse is a summer-born boy, you know. I was always the youngest in the year and therefore academically not that good. And I wasn't particularly good at sport, although I was captain of the 6-15 rugby team.
Wow. So how did that come? Did you start in the 9th, Nick, and then you worked your way up to the 6th? Or something?
Well, I mean, rugby at school was the be-all and end-all. But because it was a fairly large boarding school, we managed to field a lot of teams. So yours truly was captain of the 6-15 rugby team. And we never lost a match.
Did you play any?
We played two. We played two. Entire fixture for the year. And we won every single one.
Fantastic.
And I remember a game against Campbell College, which is a big school in Belfast, and we beat them 72-0.
Oh, wow.
That's
I can't remember what my score was.
It's a very impressive pinnacle of sporting achievement, I think, by the sound of it. My biggest question for you, Nick, about school is, at school, did you have a beard?
No.
Right. Okay,
No.
Good.
That came a bit later.
Okay. It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine without a beard, isn't it?
I did have hair on my head, though.
Nice. Yeah, I'm sure you probably did. And what about faith and all that sort of thing? Was that going on at this time, or?
Well, that's a bit of a long story in the sense that our headmaster was a very keen Christian, and so were a lot of the staff, and so were a lot of the boys. So it got me thinking, basically. I mean, I was brought up like, I guess, most of us, who parents actually didn't go to church, but regarded themselves as Christians and believed in God, etc. But at school, one encountered folk who took it seriously. And in a sense, as a young lad, I kind of had various run-ins with it, but then actually realized I didn't believe any of it. And so then I pursued that thinking and thought, well, if I don't believe any of it, ultimately, what is the point to life? And the more I thought about that, the more I found it depressing. And so really it was an evolution over time of realizing actually God was the answer. So one Saturday morning at school, I sat down and said, okay, God, you win. And then it all sort of took off from there.
And never looked back from that point.
Yeah.
And then you went on to university, I think. But just before we come on to that, we've got another question for you. Because as we look back over all of your early years up to going to uni, we have a question for you. The question is...
What's your fondest childhood memory? What's your fondest of all your childhood memories? What's your fondest?
Oh.
I think it had to be living in Singapore. Right. It was such fun. Life was outdoors. We used to go up to Malaya on holiday, used to drive up the coast and go to these deserted beaches on the Malay Pacific coast. And it was just fabulous. And we were lucky. We had an armour who did all the housework, a gardener who did the garden. And
so it's much like now, really.
As I mowed the lawn last night, anyway, yes.
All right, that's great. So let's go back. So you went to Sheffield University, I think?
Yeah, after school, spent 3 years at Sheffield University doing a degree in biblical studies. The disadvantage of that was it also included Hebrew and Greek. Now, I was never any good at languages anyway, having done French and Latin at school. So Hebrew was an absolute disaster. So I would sit down of an evening and learn a page of vocab for Hebrew. By the morning, I'd forgotten it completely. So,
can you remember any words, Nick?
No. So I failed my Hebrew paper, which didn't do me much good. Okay. But there we are.
But you got through overall.
I got through.
Which was quite good. And where did life take you after university?
I then decided to spend a year out working. So in fact, I ended up as a labourer, living back at home, which wasn't my intention, but as a labourer on an American Air Force base, RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire. At that time, they were expanding in Europe, the Americans, and they were facilitating the tanker aircraft out of RAF Fairford. So they were looking for labourers. So yours truly was a labourer for a year.
So contrary to popular rumour, you have had a proper job.
Oh, indeed.
Yes.
I was paid by the government.
Which is, that's encouraging. Obviously, that didn't last. Did you start your training at that point? It's quite early still, isn't it?
Halfway through that year, I went on my church selection conference.
Right.
And that was an interesting experience. The great thing was, what they wanted to know was, how did you feel God was calling you to ministry? So I just told them my story, which was, in fact, in my final year at school, I was obviously thinking about what university courses to do, what my future should be. And one thing school was very good at was saying, if you were a Christian, what does God want you to do? One of the disturbing things I find nowadays is that young Christian people aren't asking that question. You know, it's not about a career, it's about doing what God wants you to do. Anyway, so last year at school, I was thinking about teaching, I was thinking about social work, I was thinking about going into the Navy, because I wanted to follow my dad into the RAF and be a pilot, but unfortunately my eyesight failed me. And various friends had said to me, oh, well, why didn't you get ordained? And I thought, don't be ridiculous. And then one Saturday morning, again, gosh, it was Saturday morning again, the words, why not the church, landed on me like a ton of bricks. And I knew that was it.
So you did theological training at Wycliffe, I think?
In Oxford,
yeah,
for 2 years.
Scraped through that, just about?
Yeah. Having done theology at university, it wasn't very demanding, and I didn't actually work very hard.
Again, did enough to get by. So you come out of that and then went off to a church, I presume?
Well, I got a phone call one day from this guy who was the rector of Ashtead. Now, I didn't know Surrey at all, having obviously been to school in Northern Ireland. Parents lived in Gloucestershire near RAF Bryce Norton. And this guy phoned me up and he said, we're looking for a curate. Would you like to come down and view the place for a weekend? So I trundled along in my little car. My sister had given me, which she'd rescued from a scrap heap, a little Honda N600. And it was so basic. Anyway, so I drove down to Ashtead and do you know, I just felt I was coming home. Arrived there on the Saturday, and one of the things the rector said to me, he said, if you come here, you'd be responsible for the teenage youth group. And I said, I have never been to a youth group in my life. I was at boarding school. And he said, oh, don't worry, Nick, you'll be fine. And that evening, it went down to the youth who met after the evening church service, and there was about 100 or so in the church hall afterwards, and I thought, oh my goodness. So I went back to the rectory afterwards, and he said, we want you to come here. They didn't procrastinate about it, so I said, okay then, I'll give it a go.
Actually, I skipped over, we've got a couple of photos that probably people might like to see, people who can see photographs, not those not listening, sorry about that. Although you can, if you listen to the podcast on YouTube, if you're currently on Spotify or Apple or anything, then you will see the pictures on there. But yes, I think it's one of a bunch of friends at Wycliffe, I think.
Right. Yes. You can see how seriously we took our studies at theological college. This was an afternoon cricket match of Wycliffe against another theological college, Cuddesdon, I believe.
Another photograph which proved very popular this week on social media, I'm afraid to tell you. Which was, there we go, that was actually the ordination 40 years ago.
40 years ago.
Today, I guess.
Yeah.
Same day. Very good. That's
What a
great,
picture.
obviously a windy
Yes.
day.
Yeah.
The thing I like most about that photograph is the way that your dad's moustache is
Yeah.
superb, isn't it? Even the moustache has caught the wind. It's quite...
Well, you see, Dad's moustache, I mean, true RAF. Actually, the lovely thing is, and let me tell you another story. We were fortunate enough 2 weeks ago to be in Venice, which was a delayed Hilary's birthday event, 60th birthday event. And Alistair and his wife Claire came with us, and Simon came with us. And as we were coming back and waiting in the airport lounge in Venice, I suddenly realized my dad flew Maggie Thatcher into Venice for a big summit they had there. And the lovely thing was, Dad was such a brilliant pilot. Maggie came up onto the flight deck afterwards and said to him, you landed so smoothly, I didn't realize when we touched the ground. So Venice, yeah.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice memory. So yes, so back to Ashted.
Yes.
So you took up the job as
Yeah.
curate there, and it's
Yeah.
quite a, as you say, it's quite a major church, wasn't it?
It was a really active, thriving church. Amazing. It had one of the biggest Sunday schools in the country at the time, with 550 kids on roll, and we had 150 teenagers actually who were members of the youth group, and we'd meet every Friday night and every Sunday night. And it was pretty buzzing.
Yeah. How did you deal with that, Nick? Must have been a real challenge.
I had some great folk who were helped out as well. It was brilliant, you know.
Yeah, it sounds like you landed on your feet with that one. But
Yeah.
I guess you did the standard 3 or 4 years as curacy,
I
and
was
then
there
had to
4
look
years.
for another.
Yeah.
You didn't go into parish ministry then, did you?
Well, obviously at the end of my 4 years in Ashted, I was thinking, well, what do I do next? So I saw the job in the Church Times as youth chaplain in Bermuda.
Oof.
So I thought, that's it.
Easy choice. Excellent.
Yeah.
That's that sorted.
So I wrote off for the details, and then I thought, what I will do is I'll speak to the youth officer in this diocese to find out what's involved. So I went along to see him and explained all the things in terms of training youth leaders, running big youth events, visiting parishes, etc., etc., etc. The only problem was he then told the bishop that I was vaguely interested in the youth work. So as opposed to going to Bermuda, all I did was drove down the A3 to Guildford.
Oh, okay, it's not too
So I didn't get very far at all. So plans of Bermuda just didn't work out.
Yeah, but I think you ended up having a very fruitful time as the youth officer for the diocese.
Well, I mean, I don't want to sound critical, but one of the things I realised quite quickly is that the Church of England as an institution is pleasantly incompetent some of the time. In fact, probably most of the time. Because I very quickly realised that the church was the second largest provider of voluntary youth work in the country, and yet provided no resources or no help whatsoever in actually doing that. So I sat down and wrote first book, Working with Teenagers, which was the first manual anybody had produced for youth work in the Church of England. The institution of the church, so I can speak of this as someone who's ordained, needs kicking in the behind as frequently as possible. You know, it's an institution that needs taken by the scruff of the neck, and sometimes throttling, and sometimes just kicking.
Nice.
Yeah. So,
well, we'll bear that in mind.
Yeah.
Yes, bear that in mind.
So I have a healthy disdain for bureaucracy and rules that actually don't make things work.
But you spent quite a few years doing that, though, and had some great achievements.
It was tremendously exciting, and if you told me at the beginning of it what we would manage to achieve, I wouldn't have believed you, because a whole load of other books came out of that as well over the years, which was fantastic, just resourcing teenagers and youth work around the country. We put together this book, which was Prayers for Teenagers. And we got hundreds of young people around the diocese to contribute, writing various prayers. And we published this book, and we gave all the royalties to the Prince's Trust, because that was something I was very much involved with. And I think over the years we've sold about 36,000 copies of that book, and given a lot of money to the Prince's Trust.
Nice.
Hilary and I were invited to a garden party at Highgrove, because I was involved with the Prince's Trust for a number of years. But the exciting part of it was, we were told to meet at the station in Swindon. Seemed a bit odd. And when we got there was a whole load of people, and this coach arrived. And with the coach was police motorcycle outriders. So we were driven all the way to Highgrove, stopping the traffic, through the lights. It was brilliant. And then we got there, and we had afternoon tea, and Prince Charles came round and talked to us. I was so nervous. I think I talked absolute rubbish. But anyway.
So after all the youth work around the diocese and around the country and getting started on your illustrious author career, you ended up in sunny Pyrford, I think in 1993. I think it was you came here?
Well, that was a bit of a stitch-up job as well.
Okay.
Because some of you may remember that my predecessor was John Ash. And I knew John very well. And I bumped into him one day, and I'd heard that he was leaving Pyrford. And I said to him, John, why are you leaving Pyrford? You've only been there 6 years. And he said, well, look, the bishop's asked me to go to Godalming. And he said, but I know who should replace me. And I said, oh, that's very interesting. Who? It's you. And I discovered then again, already the archdeacon and the bishop had decided that John was absolutely right. So it seemed to be sorted out for me. I wasn't really interviewed at all. I was just told to come here.
Well,
and you've regretted it ever since.
I didn't like to say anything, but no. You know, we'll pick up the story in just a little bit. But let's take a quick diversion from the main line there, if we can. Now, normally on the show, just before our picnic, we play a little game called My Favourite Things.
My favourite things.
And we will play a proper game a bit later. But as this is a special episode, we'd also like to drop in a few favourites as we go along to give you a bit of practice. And here's the first category for you.
Yes, a very simple game, Nick. We give you a category such as, I don't know, your parishioners, and you have to tell us your favourite. Oh. No, only joking. So to kick off, Nick, okay, what's your favourite egg?
Favourite egg? Yeah. Chocolate egg.
Oh. Very good.
Chocolate egg.
Very quick answer.
Oh, very quick answer.
It's a very important question. Yeah. What about ways of cooking eggs? How do you like your eggs?
Any way will do.
Anyway,
I don't mind. I actually quite like them.
Eggs Benedict or something?
Oh, definitely. With salmon or ham. Yes, definitely.
Very good.
Okay,
yes.
Very good.
They're a miracle food, aren't they, eggs?
What's your favourite egg, Ian, do you think?
Actually, I do like eggs Benedict. Had some of that on holiday a couple of weeks ago. Lovely. Anyway, Nick, one of our categories is always multiple choice.
Yes.
I give you 3 possible answers. Let's just have a quick practice at one of those. And one of my favourite albums is Pink Floyd's The Wall. So we'd like to know your favourite wall. So 3 possible answers.
Favourite what?
Wall. So 3 possible answers for you, so it makes it a bit easier. The Great Wall of China.
Yes.
Wall's Ice Cream.
Yes.
Or picturesque West Midlands town, Walsall. Your favourite wall?
It's definitely Wall's Ice Cream.
Is it?
Yes. Right, yes. Magnums.
What's about, so you're not a fan of Walsall particularly then?
I don't think I've ever been there.
No. Okay.
Anyone in from Walsall tonight?
No. Surprising, isn't it? We did actually, I must say, as an aside, we did try to find out some interesting facts about Walsall, and there is nothing interesting. There was you just Google Walsall, interesting, and nothing comes up. Anyway, that's a little practice. We'll come back to that a little bit later. So let's get on with our intercity journey. We had just pulled in to Favourite Things siding as we took you up your post as rector here in Perford. So let's fire up the boiler and pick up the story there. What were your first impressions when you came here?
Well, actually, to be honest with you, it was quite an experience because we moved here in the September. So it was new house, new job. Alistair was born in November, new baby, Christmas. So we thought, oh my goodness, we're piling everything in at once. And we thought, if we get to the new year and still are sane, we'll probably survive. So it was all those major life things in a very short space of time.
Did you see immediately there were big changes you wanted to make in the way that the parish was run?
No, well, you see, John had been here, and then Philip Gardner before that, wonderful folk. Also, you've got to remember, with our 3 churches and the size of the congregation, it takes a long time to get to know people and figure out what's going on. And for the first year, everything is new, so it's a lot of learning.
As you look back over, because that was 29 years ago, roughly, wasn't it, give or take. Is there any one achievement, if you like, that you look back on with most pleasure?
That's an interesting question, because actually often the things that you achieve are things that are not easily articulated. And one thing I find very humbling is when people write me a letter or a card to say thank you. And I have always kept every single card and every single letter that people have actually ever sent me. And in terms of achievement, you could say, well, we've extended this church, but it's people's lives and the value, what you've given them, what you've helped them with, that's what matters. So achievement, we tend to see it in a human sense, as something tangible, but actually the things of real value, as St. Paul tells us, are the unseen, spiritual and eternal.
What about some of the lighter moments, Nick? Do you remember any funny incidents or?
Well, I mean, the lovely thing is going into the parish office. We always have light moments, we always laugh about things, and we enjoy keeping the whole show on the road.
I'm sure we have a laugh. Yeah. I've seen you laugh once or twice.
Yeah, many a time.
No.
Not many of your jokes, Ian, but...
No, you never laugh at my jokes, which is not surprising entirely. It's an incredible period of ministry to be in the same position for that period of time, but so hats off for doing that. But alongside that, you have done you talked about, you've started writing books, and that's kept on. You've done quite a lot of those now.
Writing books is very time-consuming and very demanding, so I actually haven't done it for a while now. So, you know...
But we've got a good selection here.
Yeah.
These are Nick's books that we've got. So it's an impressive array. And I think one of those brought another great and good connection. I think we've got a photograph of...
Well, Rowan Williams and I did together that book of family prayers. And he very kindly wrote a foreword in the edition of the third edition of Being Confirmed. So, yeah. And the other thing, talking about the institution even kicking... The amazing thing was, up until recent years, the Church of England would confirm tens of thousands of young people every year. And yet, they didn't produce a confirmation course. So, as well as writing Being Confirmed, Chris Herbert, who was Bishop of St. Albans and was Archdeacon in this diocese, he got together as chairman of the National Society, and with my links with the Church Pastoral Aid Society, we produced the first ever video confirmation course that was published about 30 years ago. And we got a grant from the Jerusalem Trust, which is part of the Sainsbury's family, for £50,000. And we managed to employ a professional filming company to produce the video stuff that went with that.
What was the toughest one to write, Nick, do you think, out of all of those?
Working with teenagers, the first one is 93,000 words.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was a lot of hard work.
In terms of other things, I mean, a few years ago, it's probably more years ago than I think, you became a canon at Guildford Cathedral, honorary canon, is that?
Well,
I don't really understand. If you're a canon, is that a job for life or can you get fired?
I suppose you could do, yes.
No, sorry, it's a very bad joke, and we have used that one before on the podcast. But no, seriously, it must be quite fun. You must have a ball.
The nice thing is...
It was a blast, wasn't it?
The nice thing is, I've got a seat at the cathedral, so whenever there's special event, like the Queen coming, which she did some years ago, you've got your seat there, so you're guaranteed a place.
So that's it, you just get a free seat?
Basically, yes.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Okay, it's worth striving for, isn't it? Nice. But well, anyway, look, Nick, that's all the worky stuff, but we know that you actually only work on Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
So that leaves you plenty of spare time, which we'd like to get into.
Right.
But let's just pull off the main line again and have another little go at my favourite things. Simon, have you got another category
I've got
for
a
Nick?
good one for Nick. Nick, what's your favourite road?
Favourite road?
Favourite road, yeah.
Good question.
That's a very interesting one. Okay. In the Cameron Highlands, which is up in Malaya, there's a road that goes up, single-track road, actually up to the hills in the Cameron Highlands, where, again, another place we used to go on holiday. And you could only drive up one way over a certain hour, and then, of course, you couldn't go up, but you had to let the traffic come down. But it's a pretty hairy experience, because there's a cliff edge on one side, the hill on the other, and a single-lane track all the way up to the Cameron Highlands.
And it's your favourite road?
Well, favourite, scary.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a notable road.
Well, indeed.
Good choice. It's better than the A38. But okay, so we'll just quickly do another multiple choice. One of our categories is always your favourite book of the Bible. Spoiler alert.
Right.
We'll come to that in a bit. But in the meantime, we'd like to know your favourite psalm. Now, again, there are three possible answers.
Right.
Psalm 23. Sometimes controversial author Salman Rushdie, or classic Hollywood comedy Psalm Like It Hot. Your favourite psalm?
It would be inappropriate to say what's one's favourite psalm, but as I've said to you many, many times, and forgive me for repeating myself, the refrain that repeats itself throughout the Psalms is that phrase, the steadfast love of the Lord. And what I find so amazing is that the psalmist understood that God's love was steadfast and faithful. And this was before his knowledge of the Messiah, of Christ. And it's the steadfast love of the Lord that never lets us down. And that is throughout the Psalms.
Yes, that's very good. But the question was, Psalm 23, Psalm and Rusty, or Psalm Like It Hot?
Psalm 1 to 150.
Right, okay.
Oh, there you go. You're not going to get any.
No, I'll give up on that one, but there we go. But very good. Well, I think we're kind of getting the hang of that game now, so we'll come to it shortly. But anyway, back to your extensive spare time, Nick.
Right.
I think I remember you mentioning at some point that you quite like a game of golf.
I mean, for all of us, it's good to have a sport, isn't it?
Yes.
To exercise, good company, something that's physically demanding and actually takes you into another place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you ever swear on the golf course, Nick?
I never
Have
swear
you
on
ever
the golf
sworn on the golf course?
Ken, have you ever heard me swear on the golf course? I do apologise. I haven't. No, I've never sworn. Not that I can recollect.
So then alongside golf, what else do you enjoy?
Reading books.
Okay.
I mean, we've all done a lot
books.
of reading of books, actually, the past few years, haven't we?
Any type in particular?
Andrew Marr's book, History of Modern Britain, Obama's book, beautifully written about his presidency.
So all quite highbrow then, those ones?
Oh, terribly highbrow,
Yeah,
yes. Oh, now, having said that, when we were on holiday last year in Croatia, there was a part of the hotel where people had left books to read. And I think I'd run out of whatever books I'd taken. And I read Danielle Steele, who's an American author. I mean,
What do you think of that?
I thought this was really trashy, but you know, it's a really great yarn.
That's
That's
Well, I'm glad you admitted to that because you have tried to portray a very highbrow image. But I have seen your bookshelf, and it is covered in Lee Child and John Grisham books. So I know you like a bit of a thriller as well. We talked about going on holiday there. But you quite like travelling as well. You've been a lot to Hong Kong.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So you've been there. That's nice.
Yeah. The Hong Kong was quite emotional because my father used to fly into Hong Kong an awful lot. And often, from time to time, my mum would go with them. And my dad wanted, in fact, to leave the RAF and join Cathay Pacific because he just loved the Far East. And they always told us about places they went to in Hong Kong, et cetera, et cetera. So when I had my sabbatical 5 years ago, in terms of going to Australia and New Zealand, we thought, we'll go via Hong Kong. And so we went and visited all the places that my parents had mentioned. And of course, the Peak in Hong Kong is classic. And so up we went on the, not cable car, it's the, whatever it is that goes
Stairs?
up. No, it's, what? Yeah, it's a little train that goes
funicular
up.
or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
One of those little things. You've obviously been around. I think we've got a quick picture of Jerusalem as well, which I know you had a great trip to. And another nearer home. That's your place?
That's a little bungalow in Cornwall.
Yeah. Spent a few.
To be a little bit more serious, it's great living in the rectory. The only problem is, what do you do when you have to leave it? And after I was ordained, an acquaintance of my parents, her husband was the vicar of Bybury, beautiful little village in Gloucestershire. And he tragically dropped dead one day, and she was homeless. And what many of you probably don't know, if anything happened to me, Hillary's got 3 months to get out of the rectory. So you've got to be careful that you don't end up homeless. So the lady said to my parents, make sure Nick buys somewhere. So we bought, with my parents' help, my grandmother's help, bought a little bungalow in Cornwall, which we had for 35 or so years.
Oh, yeah, very good.
Yes,
and then I also know you're quite, because you mentioned some fine points of detail about previous motor vehicles. So I think you had a picture of an early car. Was that a particularly favourite car of yours?
Oh, yes. After the Honda, which eventually I think found the scrap heap, bought an Alfa Sud. The Alfa Sud was a great car, had a lovely throaty tone to it, drove beautifully, like all Alfa Romeos. The only problem was, of course, it was Italian and it rusted. So it didn't last too long, but yeah, great car.
Well, look, I'm pleased to hear that you do manage to squeeze in some variety into life. But now, in another bit of the show, we're going to do a bit differently this evening. We're going to take a short break before talking picnics. But before we do that, and now that you've had a bit of practice, we would like to play the proper version of My Favourite Things.
My my favourite things.
So, Nick, let's kick off the real game of my favourite things, as we always do, as I said earlier, with your favourite book of the Bible.
Okay, that's an interesting question. Romans, probably?
Okay.
Yeah. Although you could ask the question, is it appropriate to say a favourite book?
Oh, I don't know.
Is that...
It's only a podcast.
It's
Not that serious.
Is that theologically correct?
I think it's fine.
Okay.
You're allowed.
Ian says it's all right, so there we
I've
are.
been challenged on that.
That's,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
If you had to go Old Testament, would you go back to Psalms? do you
Probably
think?
Isaiah or Psalms.
Nice.
Yeah,
No,
Isaiah.
Isaiah. We haven't had Isaiah on the programme before.
Yeah.
Right, there we go. Simon.
Okay, so this is a tough one for you.
Yeah.
Nick. Your favourite kitchen implement?
Favourite kitchen? We have
Yeah.
a very good knife, actually.
Oh.
It's not too sharp, but just about cuts everything, and it's the go-to knife. We've got some knives that are so blimmin' sharp, I'm frightened to death of them. But yeah.
You can't beat a good knife, can
No.
you?
What's your favourite?
I'd rather like a balloon whisk.
What, to whisk balloons?
Yeah, I did try
What
to
do you
whisk a
whisk
balloon
balloons?
with it, and it didn't work.
Okay.
I didn't quite understand the point. But
They're quite dangerous, aren't they? Didn't you have to do a whisk assessment for that?
Oh, dear.
that's terrible. Sorry. Anyway, so our third category, and the second season of the show, Nick, is always your top 5 films.
Well, fortunately, you forewarned me about
Yes.
this, so I had to think about it. I think probably one of my favourites is David Lean's Lawrence of Arabia.
Wonderful.
Do you remember the opening scenes? I mean, graphically, the whole film is just absolutely brilliant. The original Star Wars?
Oh, yes.
Gosh, that's going back a bit, isn't it? Yeah. Recently, the Kenneth Branagh film, Belfast. That was just brilliant. Really was. Another film, which I don't know whether you remember, French Kiss with Meg Ryan. At the time, my sister was working for Meg Ryan, and she was in Paris for 6 months, and we went over, in fact, and visited her when she was there. In fact, Alistair had his first birthday in Paris. She was working for Meg Ryan, and that was a great film. And fifthly, I think any film with Tom Hanks in.
Ah, yeah.
I think that's a fair shout. He's
Yeah, I
done
think
so
it's
many
definitely a fair
good
shout.
films,
Yeah.
hasn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a really nice selection, isn't it?
It's good
balanced.
range, isn't it? Yeah.
No
Not massively intellectual. Very nice, very nice. I like it.
Pleased to say.
So this game is called My Favourite Things, Nick. So we'd like to ask you a very straightforward but possibly quite difficult question, okay? We'd actually like to know your favourite thing.
Favourite thing?
Yeah, your favourite thing.
I don't know, but okay.
Yeah.
It's a rather supercilious thing. Alistair very kindly, for my birthday the other week, bought me a new golf driver. So that's my favourite thing at the moment.
That'll do. That'll do.
Yeah,
it's quite a hard question, I think, when you think about that. If you ignore people and experiences, it's just a thing.
Yeah.
You just think, and you tend to look back and you might see things. You might
And it will change.
Changes over your
Week
life,
by
doesn't
week,
it?
you know.
It will, yes. Anyway, that's the golf club is
golf
an
club,
acceptable
yeah.
answer.
Right.
That meets the rules. And finally, our real multiple choice question, and that is, of course, your favourite door.
My favourite door?
Yeah, so we've got 3 possible answers, remember, multiple choice.
Right.
The front door, the back door, or Richard Dawkins.
My favourite door is the door into the cellar, and there we have the wine racks.
Perfect. Perfect.
Perfect answer.
They were excellent. Well, they were definitely the best answers we've ever had on a live show.
I'm glad you think so.
And as I said, at that point, we're going to take a very short break just to stretch our legs. But, dear audience, I also have a task for you, because we'd like to hear your ideas for categories in which you'd like to know Nick's favourite thing. And we'll take a few of those when we come back for more Take a Pew. And welcome back to the Take a Pew podcast with Nick Aiken.
And of course with our splendid studio audience.
Indeed. Now, first things first, let's hear a few of your favourite things categories for Nick. Who wants to shout one out?
I think Eldon had one, didn't you?
Nick, I know you were a keen debater at university. What was your favourite debate?
Your favourite debate
debate
from Eldon.
Well, there's 2 that stick out in mind. Glasgow University have one of the best debating unions in the country. And I remember on one occasion speaking at the Glasgow Union, and it was a competition that evening. Can't remember the subject, but they had 3 judges. One was the president of the Clydeside Bank, who was sponsoring the debate. One was Teddy Taylor, who was the Conservative MP. Some of you remember him. And the third person was a former Scottish Nationalist MP. Now, these debates at Glasgow were always great social occasions as well. And there was a drinks reception before the debate and a drinks reception after the debate. Well, this Scottish Nationalist MP had drunk so much before the debate that during my speech, I could tell that nobody was paying a blind bit of attention. So I thought, what do? What's gone wrong? And because they were sitting behind me, the adjudicators, I just had to carry on. When I sat down, this Scottish Nationalist chap had passed out. And they were trying to revive him because he'd drunk so much. And they did say afterwards they'd never invite him back. The second one was actually at Trinity College, Dublin, and they had the Russian ambassador was chairing the debate. And there was a group of Maoist protesters outside, you see. But during the debate, some of them had got into the chamber. And fortunately, it was after my speech, but one of them hurled an egg at the Russian ambassador and hit him right in his chest. So he sat there, big guy, and got his handkerchief out and mopped it, and they evicted the Maoist protesters. So that was quite a memorable occasion.
Extraordinary.
Wow.
Extraordinary. So that was
Top that.
Yeah, so that was the first one, favourite debate. This segment could take a bit longer than I imagined.
Well, that's it now. I think
we'll take a couple more. That was great. No, sorry, that was great. Another category, Jeremy.
I'd like to know what Nick's favourite musical is, please.
Musical.
Come on. Sound of Music. And Hilary will cringe every time I watch it, every year.
Perfect.
Could you give us a bit of a rendition?
No.
Brilliant.
Wonderful.
Okay, that's okay. Another one.
Good question.
Yep, Tina.
I know Nick likes cars, so what's your favourite car? This can be aspirational.
Car?
Favourite car from Tina.
Car.
And it can be aspirational.
She said car.
Yeah, car. Yeah.
Oh, automobile. Yeah, right.
Oh.
Favourite car.
It's not a difficult word, car, is it? Have I missed something here?
Come on.
But it's funny how our kids assume and accumulate the same sometimes way of looking at things. So Alistair has inherited my love of cars. And sometimes I have to say I'm a little bit envious of the cars that Alistair now drives. And as you know, he's done 3 television series for the BBC on cars, which were an absolute hoot.
Hey! That's the best one tonight we've had. Round of applause.
Yeah.
But I suppose I would always choose a convertible every time. I suppose my favourite car would be an Audi A3 convertible. The favourite car I own, those of a certain generation will know the Ford XR3i convertible.
Yeah.
Favourite car. Let's take one more. Anita, you had one there.
What's your favourite hymn?
Favourite hymn?
Favourite hymn.
Oh, do you know, I love so many of them. I could sing them to my heart's content. Amazing Grace.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, that's the choice. Yeah.
Actually, talking of hymns, Nick, I wanted to ask you a question. Your favourite action song?
I don't respond to rude questions. No,
perfectly reasonable.
Well, that's brilliant. I'm sure we could come up with plenty. I'm sure there's plenty more brewing in the audience, but let's crack on for now. And thank you for those. Generally, a bit more enlightening than the drivel that we come up with, Simon. I think.
Absolutely.
But with that, let's get back to the show. And Nick, it's time for us to ask you the question.
What would you pick in your perfect picnic if the picking were up to you? Would you be sticking in some finger-licking chicken, or would you be silly and pick Piccadilly? Tell us, what would you choose?
What was the question?
Yes, Nick, I'll ask the question. What would you pick in your perfect picnic, Nick? So, what would you picnic in your perfect picnic, Nick?
A pork pie. Molten Mowbray pork pie.
Molten Mowbray
and a
pork
glass
pie.
of Prosecco.
Where would you go?
Where would you go?
Where would you go for your perfect picnic?
I mean, some of us used to, those lovely musical events at Nella Hall beside Twickenham Rugby Ground that went on for many years, and we'd take a picnic with us, listen to some wonderful music, and that was always a favourite. But coronation chicken?
Okay, so we've got, I think, because we want to have we've got this amazing imaginary hamper full of whatever you could possibly take with you. So we'd have a Melton Mowbray pork pie,
right?
Some coronation chicken. What else would you fill?
Coleslaw.
What
more do you
all
want?
In a bowl, what mixed together?
No, I don't have a highly discerning palate.
Any cheeses or cakes, puddings? That sort of
brie is, standard. I'm not a great lover of cheese.
So if the pudding would be...
Oh, the dessert. Oh, trifle.
Trifle.
Yeah.
So we're building up quite a nice picnic now, aren't we? We're slowly
We're getting there eventually, yes.
That's fair enough. Well, we hope you get to enjoy such a picnic very soon anyway. Right. Sounds like about time you had one. But back to our express journey aboard the locomotive that we call Nick Aiken's life. And we've travelled up to the present day, of course, but now we look ahead along the tracks.
Right.
As we ask you...
12 years from now, where would you like to be? Working hard in a town, or chilling by the sea. 12 years from now, what would you like to be doing? Or would it mainly be the same? Or would you rather be canoeing, for example?
Yes, just an example.
So yes, Nick, what would you like us to be talking about if we were having this conversation 12 years from now?
I'm not sure the question's the right question, because take each day as it comes. Don't fret about the future. Just go with the flow. Okay, you have to plan, you have to think. 12 years' time, who knows?
Yes, there'll be an interesting period, though, and we do get quite a variety of answers to that, that question. Obviously, it depends on the ages, particularly of the people involved. But I think we all agree that it's who knows, and God willing, and all that sort of thing. Yeah. But it's quite an interesting period for you, I mean, in the next 12 years, because obviously, I presume will you still be doing this in normal circumstances?
I think after more than a few more years, you'll probably be sick to death of me anyway. So
that might change.
One will need what? one will need to retire gracefully.
Yes.
And so the question is there, where to live, where to go.
As you were saying before, it could be quite interesting, yeah. Anyway, well, we wish you every blessing, Nick, wherever life and the Lord may take you. And so you will all be pleased to know that we come to the final leg of our journey, which is a long straight run through the fields and countryside of highbrow intellectual theology.
So, Nick, shortly we'll be asking you for your spiritual pearl of wisdom. But before that, we as ever have come up against the buffers of a biblical bone of contention, and we'd like some help to clear the way. And we call this part of the show...
Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Is it true?
Yes, is it true? Now, we have this part of the show because it's a good opportunity to quash misconceptions about faith and the Bible, as well as to expose things we think we know, but which are actually not necessarily true. Nick, we do have a little theory for you that we have heard concerning Jonah.
Yes.
Now, we know that Jonah was told by God that he was to go to the naughty city of Nineveh. And the story goes that after he had had a few Jaffa cakes, apparently, he tries to sail off. That's an obscure Bible reference for anyone who knows that one. He tries to sail off somewhere else and ends up being thrown into the sea. But we have heard it, Nick, on good authority, that what then ensued was the subject of a mistranslation in the Bible, and that what actually happened was that Jonah ended up in Wales. So, Canon Nicholas Aiken.
Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Is it true?
Is it true?
Now, Ian, you obviously haven't been paying attention. I told you my Hebrew was rubbish. So when I read, the passage in the Old Testament in Hebrew, I can't remember if it was Wales or Scotland.
But what are the two? Jonah's quite a popular Welsh name, I think. That must have come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And of course it's allied to, because there's another myth, or legend, if you like, that Jesus had a holiday in Cornwall, isn't there?
Yeah.
Which is actually something that's seriously put forward, I don't know. Yeah. So maybe...
Yeah. I've got a theory on this, Ian. I've got a theory, and I've been thinking about this quite carefully. So I think, if you don't mind indulging me, I think what happened, right, it was a Welsh dragon pretending to be a fish, pretending to be a seahorse, because dragons look a bit like seahorses. So he kind of engulfed, he ate him, and then he went back to Wales and spat him out.
So he did go. So Jonah did end up in Wales.
So he did end up in Wales.
But inside a dragon,
Inside
disguised as a seahorse.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the only logical answer.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. But,
If you could report, please, that not to the bishop, that heresy began
does that count
in Purford, I'd be very grateful.
we have been accused of heresy before, actually.
No,
we're
fine.
only joking.
Yeah.
We know it was Belgium. But anyway, with that, Nick, perhaps you could bring us back to some sense of normality with your spiritual pearl of wisdom.
It's a spiritual pearl of wisdom.
It's got to be, don't sweat the small stuff. And as human beings and as a church, we often get our knickers in a twist and get diverted into things that do not matter. And the simple fact is, very, very few things in life matter. So concentrate on the things that are important. Love and relationships, and everything else will fall into place. Don't sweat the small stuff. And often as Christians, that's what we do too much. And the history of the church isn't a great one on this. And actually, what we end up doing is actually obscuring the truth and obscuring the reality. And when you think about Jesus' ministry, who it was to, what he was saying, he was focusing on what really matters. And a lot of it that we conjure up doesn't matter at all. Don't sweat the small stuff.
It's a spiritual pearl of wisdom.
Well, thank you very much for that, Nick. And I was very pleased on this occasion to see so many of our audience taking notes. But
Very impressive.
And that just leaves us with the part of the show that Simon just refuses to give up, despite the abundance of evidence that it really has no place in the world.
Simon's random question.
Simon, what is your random question for Nick?
Well, Nick, I was recently struck by the names of sports teams that feature animals. So, you've got rugby league side, Leeds Rhinos, for example, the Chicago Bulls, and of course the British Lions. And that caused me to wonder, what would be the best combination of animals and sport? In other words, which animals would be best at which sports?
That's a good question, to be fair.
Yeah. You're asking me that question?
Yeah.
It's a bit random, obviously.
Slightly random,
that's the name of the... If you had to pair up an type of animal with a sport, which would work quite well?
Well, elephants would obviously be very good at football.
That's a
There we are.
Good shout.
Don't ask me why.
Yeah.
That's as far as it goes, as far as I'm aware.
That's quite a good answer.
We had some thought. We thought maybe an octopus might be quite good at darts.
Yeah.
And I did also think, I used to do quite a lot of tenpin bowling, bizarrely. And I did, yeah. And we thought a three-toed sloth would be very good at, because the bowling balls have got three. It's like they've evolved. The sloth has evolved to do tenpin bowling. Yeah. They take a long time to do it. They do. Yes. So there are some animals that clearly wouldn't work, like a tortoise and the parallel bars. That would be awful.
Or a giraffe ice skating.
Yeah, that really wouldn't work. But then I think elephants and football is quite a good one. But otters would be very good at swimming, obviously.
Backstroke.
And cheetahs at 100 metres would, not only does it rhyme, but they would be very good, wouldn't they? And actually, I did find out this week. I think it's quite interesting. When a cheetah, when it's in full flow, each stride is 7 metres. That's how far they're running. That's how they go so fast.
When did you retire in? Was that a while ago?
Yes.
Yeah. You've obviously given this deep and profound question a lot of thought, both of you.
It's an important part of life. But I like the idea of elephants playing football. I think that's good. Thanks, Nick, for that one. But,
very good.
Well, Simon, yet again, we failed to address any matter of significance.
Hey, mate, as it's a really special show,
Yeah.
can I ask one bonus random question?
What do we think? Do we think we should allow Simon to do that? Oh dear. On your heads be it. Go on then, Simon, if you really must.
So my second random question for you, Nick, is would you rather always have to shout or always have to whisper?
Yeah, that's a very practical question. Yeah.
Nobody likes being shouted at, do they? I suppose if you whisper, people will strain to hear what you've got to say. So I think whisper.
Well, I think that's probably... Do we think that's right? Yeah, whisper's a good shout. Because, I mean, it's more difficult shout. I was imagining if you ended up being a librarian and you shouted, it would be, welcome to the library! Oh, shh, it's a library. Sorry, I always have to shout. It would be a nightmare. Why didn't you choose always have to whisper? I didn't know that was an option.
But I think you could get away with shouting in public if you dressed up as a town crier. Wouldn't be so good at home, would it? Yeah. Say, Hillary, put the... Oh, yay! Hillary, put the kettle on, please. All right, love, there's no need to shout.
But you know, I remember at school on a Saturday afternoon on the High Street in Coleraine, there was from time to time some street preachers with their megaphone would shout at people. And I just thought, that's the way to put people off. But they thought they were doing the right thing. None of us like being shouted at.
I think that's a good answer. I think if you had a choice, if it was one or the other, I think it's the lesser of two weevils, isn't it? But,
two weevils?
Yes. Anyway, well, Simon, I'm not sure that question was any more edifying than the first one. But in any case, that was... Simon's Random Question! And so, Nick, you, along with everyone here, and no doubt everyone listening, will be pleased to know that brings us to the end of our journey. Thank you for being such a good sport, and thank you for being such a great guest on our first ever live show. Thank you, Nick.
Well, thank you for coming.
And finally, thank you, of course, to all of our wonderful listeners. We do hope you've enjoyed following the fun. We'll be back with another episode after a little summer break. But in the meantime, it's Toodle Pip from me.
And Tatty Bye from me.
Join us again next time as we take a cue